Hey everyone, it's Katie here, and it's Wednesday, which means we are on episode 3 of She's the Boss. I have Serena Holmes with me today. I'm super excited that you are here. And Serena is such a powerhouse. She is like a triple threat times 5. She's doing so many things. She has her own book, she's a real estate investor, she has her podcast, which is going for a year now and very successful, may I say, on top of also previously owning Tigress, right? I keep screwing it up. But so today I would love to know more about your journey and kind of like where you began, challenges you faced, and how you've rebranded yourself because you had such a huge transition within your life.
Yeah.
So, just a quick introduction if you'd like to do to the everyone watching, and then we'll kind of dive into your entire journey. That'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. So I started out in events, so promotional marketing, and I had the opportunity to pretty much, step into the role as manager and then later a partner of Tigress. So I was only newly out of university, trying to be in broadcast, wasn't happening, maybe as quickly as I thought that it would be. So this opportunity presented itself and I went ahead with it. And the woman that founded the business actually left about 4 years in. So we went through a buyout in the middle of the 2008 recession, but came out of it successfully on the other side. And then I ran it for another 14 years. And I had a business coach that I hired in 2012 that encouraged me to start investing with some of the retained earnings in the business. And that led into, the real estate investing stuff. And then that snowballed when we started staffing events for a really well-known real estate education platform. And, things just kind of grew from there.
Right. Now, speaking of, going into your entire entrepreneurship journey, you mentioned that you were in university for journaling or broadcasting.
Yeah.
Like how that fell onto you and onto your plate. Like walk me through what that story looks like. Because it's not often that university students are being given this opportunity to kind of just scale up really fast.
Yeah.
When it's kind of completely different too in what they're already pursuing, which is obviously a passion of theirs.
Yeah.
So what did that look like for you when it just like fell onto you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was really passionate about writing and I, had a big interest in sharing stories for other people, which I guess aligns well with now having a podcast, like 25 years later. But at the time I went through broadcast, and what they don't tell you is, it's probably even harder now, but even back then, like it was a very concentrated industry where you have to maybe move to Sudbury or move to a really small market to carve out a niche for yourself. But I kind of started with that, went through the program. And while I was in, I think, my first year of university, somebody said, you should get into promotions. Like you're just sampling stuff. It's a lot of fun. It pays really well. So, we're sampling like Appleton rum and Grand Marnier at golf tournaments and making $25 an hour. And it was great. It was easy work. And, once you get into that, like, of course, the girl you connect with is like, hey, I work for this person, that person. It just snowballs from there. And that's how I met the woman that started Tigress. So I, worked for another company that she was with for a couple of years. And then when she started this and a few other divisions, she asked me to come on board. So it just, one thing kind of led to another. And I did do videography part-time as a volunteer for Rogers for 2 years while I was getting Tigress off the ground. But again, it just wasn't really leading anywhere. So that's where I put it on pause and just went full steam ahead with the events.
No, but you ended up finishing university.
Yeah.
And you obviously would have had the opportunity to kind of grow if you wanted to maybe go with Toronto Star or anything like else.
I didn't get hired anywhere. Yeah, I was unemployable, I guess. I got a letter from the Weather Network, like my rejection letter.
Oh, damn it, Weather Network.
Yeah. So I've got some of those. But yeah, it was hard to get started in Toronto because we're one of the biggest cities in the country. So you really have to start in a small town, probably back then for 20 grand a year. And I didn't want to move away.
No, of course.
So you've got to kind of be willing to do those things.
Right. So you kind of, in essence, you almost made a sacrifice at that time of your life where it's like you wanted to pursue the dream you had and you ended up going kind of full force into Tigress, like you mentioned. Now, transitioning from what you were passionate about into kind of helping grow this massive company, what it is now.
Yeah.
What did that look like for you at the time? Because you were obviously a lot, like you were younger then. So
yeah, I mean, we were very much referral based and I was brought in just for operations. So I was always a person kind of like behind the scenes, planning the events, doing payroll, stuff like that, to the point that, I had a girl come up to me at our Christmas party. She's like, I just want to know who signed my paycheck. Like, because I wasn't necessarily out there. Like Melissa was the one that was at, going out there recruiting and bringing in business and stuff like that. And that was pretty much how we grew for the first 7-8 years. And then one of our big clients restructured and I knew we had to do something to bring in business or we could go out of business.
Right.
And started doing SEO. And that led into, we went from, I don't know, a couple calls a month to like 3 calls a day.
Right.
Immediately got traction in that sense. And then I think it was about 6 or 7 months in, I met someone that has a company called Training Business Pros. And he, at the time, would teach digital marketing for small business owners.
Okay.
So I learned how to do targeted keyword research and optimize blogs. And ultimately, that's how I sold Tigress later, because we ranked on the first page of Google for hundreds of keywords. So if you were to search Toronto event staffing or Calgary brand ambassadors, like we would come up at the top. So people that could be in the States, or, we had a client from Greece I even met with in Athens, like the government of South Australia, like if they had an event here, they would search, and that's how we would come up.
Right. So you're able to kind of really tailor that to what would benefit you guys. Now, is that something that like is being actively shared to people, you think, on like how to really benefit their company on like with the searchable keywords?
So, I mean, that was one of my biggest regrets that I talk about in the book was that my partner and I had a meeting with someone in 2005 to talk about SEO. And at the time, like, we didn't fully understand it. We were like, we're fine. And then when we later had a website, it looked like a Word document. Like, imagine had we started that in 2004, let alone 2012,
right?
How much further ahead you'd be. So like, yes, we did start then. We grew, say we had 100 quotes that year. We grew by 100 quotes a year every year. So by 2019, we had like 800 quotes for 1 year. So like we were just exponentially gaining that many more quotes year over year. But every business is different. Like for us, it made sense because a lot of people do travel for events and stuff. So they want to scale. And it's a very niche industry. Yes. So again, we're more B2B. The work itself out there is more B2C, but you're working with like the airport, Rogers, like consumer packaged goods and stuff like that. I think it just depends on your business. Like for real estate, that's a big part of it, but it's very much more of a relationship based. Yep. So it just depends on how your customers are going to find you. If that's a strategy that will work, and it does change all the time. So, we would do a lot of it ourselves and then still work with an SEO company so that their ears to the ground for like the algorithm and any changes and what once worked suddenly doesn't work, just like social media.
Figuring
right?
out like okay, why?
Yeah.
And
so
making that work out.
Yeah. So like we did well early on, but I think it just depends on the nature of your business.
That makes sense. Now you mentioned that you have a book. Now I really want to go into that because it seems to be there's a lot of people out there who do have books. Yeah. Or they're looking to kind of scale up and even do even more books, but they don't have the passion for that. Yeah. So like what's your book called and what's it about? And also what other mistakes are in that book? Because you just mentioned that a mistake there.
Yeah. So it's called The Accidental Entrepreneur. And it's very much a mix of a memoir and business book. So it's not just business. But I went through a lot of crazy things when I was growing up. And as I got older, people were like, you got to write a book about this one day. Like just because I, share a little bit of what had happened. And then as I became an entrepreneur, those challenges paved that path into entrepreneurship because I was kind of like scrappy and just seizing opportunities and like work 4 jobs, sure, like throw in a fifth, like, you're just doing what you kind of get by. Yes. And then it kind of led into running the business. And then there's a lot of lessons obviously that played out over the 18 years. And I went to an event in 2018 where they were selling a writing retreat in San Diego. So I went to that and I wrote probably 17 of the 31 chapters. And then I finished the rest when I came back. And then I was like, now how do I publish this?
That's a whole other thing.
So I actually put it on the shelf for a couple of years. And then when COVID hit, I committed to 2 things. So one was getting the book published. And then the other was my real estate license. Because I thought, well, who knows how long this will last? I should have a backup plan.
Yeah.
So.
Got it. So then you dived into, so you got your real estate license. And then you're obviously growing a portfolio as being a real estate agent. Now, what did that look like? That's another transition that you took. Because I feel like we've just talked about like 2 separate transitions that have happened. Now we're going into another one where you have a real estate license. And like, how was that going for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I got it, I just thought I'm passionate about real estate investing. If COVID lasts longer than we anticipate and I can't run events, then I should have something to fall back on. And what I didn't really maybe think through at that time is that residential real estate and working like B2C is very different than working with businesses.
Yes, very much so.
And while I have had some lovely clients, I've had some very emotionally charged and stressful clients.
Right.
So, I think in a perfect world, ideally, I'll find a way to carve out a path in the commercial space. But because I did have a lot of passive income for the last several years, I didn't have to work that hard at being a realtor.
Right.
I'm at the point now, just because of some of those things shifting, that I'm looking to be more active, but I'm still trying to figure out the best way to approach that from a commercial standpoint, because I don't really see myself like door knocking in open houses every weekend.
No, especially with you having a daughter, that's not something you want to be taking your time away from.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. So you have so much on your plate. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, also on top of that, your podcast too.
Yeah.
Now, so what's going on with your podcast? I know that it's been quite successful for the last year.
Yeah.
So what does that surround? What's the topic of discussion with your podcast majority of the time?
For sure. So it's called Inspire to Invest. And I kind of looked at it from the standpoint that when I talk to people, sometimes they feel really intimidated or overwhelmed by the concept of real estate investing.
Got it.
And people can feel like this isn't for me, or how do I do this? And I wanted to share stories from people to show like what they were doing before, and then what that catalyst was that motivated them to go down this path, and then how it's really transformed their lives, and like what potential that can provide for them. And, I think it's just, my saying is like you rise by lifting others, right? So I like to share those stories, because then someone might be like, oh, well, if they can do it, why can't I do it? Like they're a stay-at-home mom, or maybe they're an account manager, or maybe whatever that may be that push them in that direction. And hopefully, inflation's out of control. Like I think if you're just relying on a salary and one income, there's a lot of risk with that.
Yes.
So I think to provide for yourself in the long term, investing in real estate is probably one of the best tried and true ways to do it. And there have been a lot of challenges in the industry lately. And I can say like, some of those people, there's things they could have done differently to be in a different position now. Right. So even I think passive and active, there's been a lot of lessons for people in the last year, but I still believe it's the best, not to say the easiest, but one of the best ways to grow your wealth. If you hold on to something and it doubles in value in a few years, like where else can you double your money?
Right.
I think it still makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a step back here. So you were running a big portion of Tigress for at a younger age.
Yeah.
Now, what sort of challenges did you face at the time, not only just being a female, but also being at a younger age, when a lot of the time kind of the, CEOs, presidents are of the older demographic per se, or a lot of male dominated industries. So what did that look like for you at a younger age, and kind of being a big part of a really big company? What did that look like?
So one thing that's kind of funny is like most people didn't know I was a partner, or later like the owner, because we use like account manager titles or account director titles. So we walk in with another account manager from whatever company, and they were kind of like on the same level, So a lot of times people just had no idea, because they don't really know about the company. It's like we go to their office, they don't come to our office. Like people just didn't know what they didn't know. And I had a mentor in, I think, 2014 that's like, what's this account director title? Like 10 years in. So he was the one that's like, you got to change this.
You got to know this.
And we're at the point, like we were growing at that point in time, right? I think I had 3 or 4 full-time employees and, thousands part-time. So he encouraged me to change the title, and he goes, people will look at you differently. And, I was also 10 years older at that point. So I was in my early 30s then. But that was kind of how we carved things out in the beginning. And if people said, oh, well, where's your office? Oh, we're just east of Toronto. Like it's my business partner's parents' basement, but like no one knows that.
No one knows. No one needs.
Doesn't
to know
matter.
No,
and it's before remote work was acceptable. So
exactly.
That's just what we told people, right? And it didn't change our ability to do the work, but we were starting out, and it made sense to pay ourselves over paying for an office. So that's kind of how we started out. So
do you find, or did you find that once you changed your title, it made a huge difference with your communication with people, or did the people actually start treating you differently?
I mean, not necessarily. Like I did it because my mentor told me to do it. And when I did it and someone noticed it, they're like, oh, you got a promotion. Like it was kind of, it was just because people didn't know. I don't think it necessarily mattered, but maybe they see as you start to grow and you're building and stuff like that. Maybe,
of course.
Maybe they looked at things different.
Yeah.
And to your point about being a female, I think there's only one meeting, maybe 2 that I had where it felt like that was an influence. Like one meeting was with an electronics company, and I think it was like 5 men, and they must have been in their between 40 to 50. And then I'm there as like maybe early 30s, and I just felt, it's hard to even pinpoint it. Like totally it just felt like this isn't going anywhere. Like totally ghosted me after. And it's not that we couldn't do the work. It just, you could just tell, like they just didn't take it seriously. Yeah. So I mean, it is what it is. And I don't know if it was a female thing or if it's something else, but I wouldn't say it was common. And a lot of the clients we worked with were female that were account managers, or event coordinators and stuff. So it was never really a big thing.
Right.
Maybe the age in the beginning, but
could be. Yeah. That's interesting to look at. And then you're at this point in life now where you can sit here and think back at those things and be reflecting on it, being like, maybe if I ever run into someone who maybe is in my shoes, you know, they could be treated a little bit better or something.
Well, and it's how you present things, right? Like, I mean, we were still, you know, very responsive. Like if someone is to email me at 8:00 at night, I might not sit there and do a quote, but I would always acknowledge their email. They'd have the quote like before they woke up. Like clients are like, why are you emailing at 4 a.m? Like, you know, like, but they knew they could trust us and depend on us, right? So I think it's all in how they demonstrate their professionalism and their ability to do the work.
Right.
It's, you know, if they were young and then they're, you know, not replying for a week, then that would be different.
That's a lot different. So. I've noticed with some of the individuals I've worked with previously that are of the younger demographic, where it's definitely a different work ethic. Now, speaking of work ethic, obviously you at a younger age and you're running a big part of this company that you were in. Like, do you see a difference now compared to what you were like when you were younger compared to people now?
I don't want to brushstroke it in the sense that it's all young people. I mean, in my particular situation, like I was providing for myself. So yes, I was going to work. I was going to show up. I was going to commit.
Of course.
You know, I did find that as time passed with the business, you know, it became harder in some ways because it became a little more mainstream. So people knew that if they blew off work with us, they could get work with 20 other agencies, right? Like there's brand ambassador pages on Facebook where there's just a constant flow of that gig work, right? To the point that someone actually started a Google spreadsheet along the way for brand ambassador accountability. So if you wanted to see if anyone had like burned another company, you could look them up. And I'm sure that's probably not legal, but it was a way
because
a
few websites like that,
the companies don't talk and there's no way to know. So if you really wanted to see like if anything big had happened, like it wouldn't account for everyone, but you could, if something significant had happened, put them there so that another agency maybe wouldn't end up with an issue with them as well. So that I was like a brand ambassador accountability page that was circulated among different agencies. So
it's kind of scary though.
Yeah.
Who knows what's on the internet?
I know.
It's scary.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So you've done so much obviously in your lifespan so far. And I know you mentioned previously that you brought home quite a few awards for being an entrepreneur. So can you kind of walk me through how you got to that point?
Yeah. So I think just like anything, like I started to, I don't want to say take things seriously, but view things a little bit differently when we hit that 10-year mark. So that's really was like a real big turning point for us in a lot of ways, where like I hired a bookkeeper. It helped me alleviate a lot of the extra time that I was wasting on the business to grow. You know, we started hiring a lot more employees. We went from, you know, me one part-time, one full-time to like eventually we had 8 or 9 as those years kind of continued. And part of that was just applying for awards. Like in some instances, like it's just a matter of putting your name in the hat, right? And then being recognized for different things. Like sometimes they could be voter driven, other times it's based on a campaign that you did and things like that. So, you know, we probably put ourselves up for dozens and dozens, but we ended up, I think, with 18 wins in total. So I was kind of like, one for every year we were in business. You know?
That's amazing.
It was kind of the way we looked at it, but it was all between 2014 and 2019 or 2020.
Got it. So speaking of awards, because I don't think there's a lot of people out there who can just go and apply to receive an award. So what was the process that you guys had to go through? And if you can give some advice to maybe businesses or any entrepreneurs that are out there watching this, like some advice on how they can do that.
Yeah. So I think it's just a matter of being like trying to see what is out there. And you also have to know like what's real and what's not, because there are some awards that you just would pay. You know what I mean? Like it's obviously not worth anything other than the trophy that you
trophy itself.
Yeah. So I mean, there are some that you know, there's even a sponsorship level sometimes that could come with it. But the first one that I won was with the W100, which is with Chatelaine magazine. So that's kind of like its own independent thing. I scraped in at number 96,
that's you know, good,
but then I made that list, and then later they retired that. One was with like the Consumer Choice Awards. We won like Top Choice Awards, I think 5 years in a row. There's a whole bunch of, one was with the Camp Awards. So it was like a marketing association. And that was actually for a campaign that we did a TransferWise, which was pretty cool. We built like a 500-pound alarm clock, and then we did a 100-person pillow fight in the BCE place.
I love that.
didn't get arrested. So almost did, but didn't.
Okay,
so,
now can we talk about that?
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. It's like a really awesome video. But
is it on the internet currently?
Yes, it is.
I'm definitely gonna have to watch that.
Yeah,
I wish we could bring it up, Ravi, and have this video playing behind us right now.
It was actually like awesome. Like they had a drone flying, they had all that stuff, and you know, we were trying to be helpful. Like we brought shop vacs, and they're like, just leave, just
get out, leave the feathers, it's fine.
Yeah, that was definitely like one of the coolest things I think that we worked on. And the guys were from the UK, and again, they found us online. I think I was volunteering with an elephant nature park in Thailand when their email came in.
Oh my gosh.
So we're at the time like referring them over to my account director at the time, and getting things off the ground, but they were awesome clients.
That's pretty entertaining. Yeah, I'm gonna have to watch this video after, or if you can send it to me, that'd be great. I'll send it to you. So one thing I want to talk about is like you've had quite a few transitions in your life. So you went from being like CEO, president of a company, to into a real estate agent, and then going into doing investing, and then now you have the podcast.
Yeah.
So what would be a couple pinnacle points in your life where you realized that you were on the right path? Because obviously the path that you have taken is a lot different than what you were planning to do.
Yeah.
So what sort of pinnacle points did you reach?
Yeah, I think, I mean, sometimes it's just those crossroads, right? Like these opportunities come up where you have to be like, okay, like, do I continue trying to get into journalism, or this opportunity is right here in front of me, or do we run with this?
Right.
And sometimes those things just naturally, organically come to you, right? So I think that kind of evolved in that sense. That made sense. And I think for, selling Tigress and going more into the real estate stuff, like, I feel like my priorities really shifted because my daughter was young. And at that time, I had one person I kept throughout the pandemic. And when she left, I was like, do I have it in me to build it up to where we were? Like we had 10 full-time employees in office that, we were really proud of. And if we weren't starting over, but it felt like we were going to go like this coming out. And I'm like, I'm not prepared to handle like this bang coming out of COVID because we don't have what we've spent years and years building.
Right.
And I just had to decide, like, do I have this in me? Do I want this? Like my daughter at that time was maybe only just over, I guess, just a year and a bit old. And I just had to decide, and it just made more sense to go that way. And I thought I had it figured out. Like, I was doing really well with private lending. I was like, I can depend on this.
Yep.
And, for 5.5 years, like it's been pretty stable. And then things have turned. So now I'm like, okay, well, not only do I need to have something else coming in, like I want to kind of figure out what that next step is.
Right.
So I've been trying to identify, again, what that path into commercial could look like. I've even entertained getting my dealing representative license to work with exempt, like off-market securities and stuff like that, because I have people that often come to me looking for those connections. So I'm kind of at another crossroads, I guess, in some ways, just trying to figure out what's next.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. That definitely makes sense. Now, with all the transitions that you've had in life, because it's like 5 different people, who would you say is the most influential person that you've met in your entire lifetime, and why?
Oh, well, I mean, obviously my business partner, like, had that opportunity not happened, then who knows what life could have even looked like, right? I mean, that would be a big thing just because that was a defining moment for me. And then I also had a mentor that was really helpful. Like he had a very big impact. And I think he understood that I was a very like task oriented person. And like, it's one of those things, like, where you want to go, but you need to figure out how to get there. So he came up with like a very specific action plan, like all the things that we need to do. And I feel like that really had a big impact on our business, and like how we were able to grow, like between him and Paul from Training Business Pros, like those two people were big in terms of like growing the business and leading us down to all the things that happen afterwards.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Now, when you were in university and then you ended up finishing university, going into working with Tigress, would you consider that was a big risk that you had took at the time?
I mean, I didn't look at it as a risk really, because I mean, you can, as long as you had like your computer and phone, it's not like we were investing in a consumer packaged goods company where we're both putting like 500 grand into it. You know what I mean? Like, I think her debt was like $5,000 or something like that. We went from 5,000 in sales to 100,000 to 500,000 from year like 1, 2 to 3.
Yep.
And when you talk about like those opportunities, like I was floored at the one company giving us that opportunity. Like it was for 112 stores across the country for 6 weeks. And it was like a $350,000 contract. And we were like, how did they just give that? And we were leaving being like, what? And like, I think we had like less than a month to plan it. And in the middle of that, my partner like went on holidays for 2 weeks. So like I planned most of it. And I was just like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Like we're hiring, like it's our first national program in all these different markets and stuff. It's before even social media had, I think it's a year Facebook started. Like it wasn't really in existence yet, right? So we had to find out a model to like find people in each city and then find a way to hire all those people and manage them and stuff like that. But we did it, and they became a client for many years afterwards. But I mean, I was 25, and looking back, I'm like, how did they trust us with that? Like, so.
Well, they definitely did, and obviously it
worked
everyone
out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if there are individuals or anyone who knows of somebody who's looking to maybe take the way of becoming like a brand ambassador and take that line down, like what sort of piece of advice would you want to give someone who's of the younger generation that maybe is looking to take that path away?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, you can kind of see it on both sides. Like I think a lot of the things that we integrated with Tigress, I learned from things I didn't like with the agencies I had worked for. So for example, the first woman I worked for, like I loved the work and the people I worked with, but she would take like months and months and months to pay. Like she was just horrible to work for in that sense. And like even how she communicated details, like very unprofessional. So we committed to paying biweekly from the very beginning. Like I would use a personal line of credit to pay our staff, knowing like our client would pay us in 4 weeks or 6 weeks.
Got it.
So from day one, like we always paid very quickly. Eventually that became direct deposit, and, just try to streamline things. We developed like event protocols. So it was always like very clearly outlined, like what those expectations were. And I just would say that, if you're going to accept an opportunity, be very clear that you can accept it and you want to accept it, so that you're not letting people down. Because at the end of the day, like one of the biggest challenges that we had is like everything could be ready to go. And then if somebody cancels on short notice, it's like you're doing damage control and picking up the pieces and stuff like that. Yeah. So I think that was hard, but we always try to be very transparent up front and let people know like what the job entails, so that it's not a matter of like, well, I didn't know, like there was one instance, even thinking back, that I was going to work for another agency, and there's 2 red flags. They're like, well, we don't pay we pay half of what you normally make, but you'll make it up in the volume of hours. And I was kind of like, okay. So then I go to the training session all dressed up, because I'm thinking it's professional for training. And they had us load like 7,000 bottles of water on a truck. And I'm literally in like high heels and dress pants. And they have us doing manual labor that they didn't tell us we'd be doing that. Like I would have obviously worn like running shoes or like not a nice outfit. And it just, a couple things rubbed me the wrong way. And I was like, you know what? Like, I don't feel like they're a company that I can depend on. Like they haven't given me the information that I needed to know to make a proper decision here. Right. And that was one instance where I canceled on short notice. And I just feel like I'm not saying they had it coming, but I was like, listen, I didn't. The communication
maybe was lacking.
Yeah, completely lacking. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, but I still returned the shirt that I had, like, so that they could fill the spot and all of that. But for the most part, like we would try to eliminate those things from happening. And I think you get out of people what you put in. So we did have people that stayed with us for years and years and years, like, and help them through different periods of time. And they might work one event or 10, but they knew that they could depend on us, and all that we asked, that we could depend on them.
For sure. Yeah. Now, with the transition of life happening and everything that you did learn on the job with Tigress, how did that really impact decisions that you make now? How much did that experience play into what you do now?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's just all like inherent, right? Like just the way that maybe you look at things and the things that you look for. I think, I think one learning I've had just in the last 5 to 6 years, though, is just, again, never assume that because something has been a certain way, it'll continue to be that way, and not to get too comfortable. So I think no matter what you're doing, if it's investing, business, life, like, just always take the time to look at things from all angles to make sure, because sometimes shifts are happening and you just may not be aware of it, right? So I think you should never really totally lighten up in that sense.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah.
You're just scaring me right now. Now, going into rebranding, because that's obviously something people run into a lot of the time when they're going through a career change.
Yeah.
How was it for you when you were basically having to rebrand yourself for doing something for so many years into now being in real estate, agent and everything else that you're doing with your podcast, your book and stuff? So rebranding for yourself, like what was that journey like for you?
Well, it was definitely different, because I feel like with Tigress, we always put the brands out there and the staff out there. And, even if you look at the social media, like I would pop up in it sometimes, but, I was always, again, it's everybody else first. Like we're selling our stuff, we're selling our events,
of course,
and all of that. Right. So with real estate, it's the total opposite. It's like,
you have to be there.
you're there.
This is me.
The people want to know who you are. They want to know what's going on with you. And like, they want to know they can trust you.
Yes.
And it's a total different, it's very much the personal brand instead of like just the brand.
Right.
Right. So I think that's been a little bit of a different dynamic. I put myself out there for it. Like, you know, I had the journalism background, so maybe that's coming in handy, but I wouldn't say it's my preference. Like, you know, I'd rather kind of still be a little bit more like I would be drawn to the operations and behind the scenes stuff.
Right.
You get out there because you have to sometimes, and I can do it. I don't love it, but I'll do it if you need to. So it's been adapting in that sense. And I think the other thing is that real estate is so much more mainstream. So, I mean, everybody probably knows a dozen realtors plus. So, well, why do I use you? So creating that point of difference, you know, it's not like I can say I've sold 1,000 houses, planned 12,000 events, but it's a different dynamic. So getting people to trust you to like, even though you know you can deliver and you can do the work, and not only will I help you in that respect, I'll help you like maybe view things from the investor point of view and, you know, consider other things that you hadn't thought about, right? But it's just carving out that different dynamic with people.
So what have you found is the most challenging part of that?
Yeah, I think just even standing out. Like, I mean, there's definitely people that, you know, I'm sure they knew that I got my real estate license and you're like, oh, they're selling their place. And like, it would be someone that you would think would at least talk to you about it. And then you're kind of like, well, who knows what their relationship was with that realtor. And they often say like, don't expect the people that are in your family and friend groups to use you in the beginning, because they're still trying to see like,
how you
if you can make it and how you are, you know, so you're more likely to probably actually book with strangers than you are with people that are in your immediate group. As weird as that might seem.
It does seem kind of odd, but I mean, like if things go sour too, I'm sure they want to also keep that family relationship going anyways, or friend relationship going too. Now, so there is a lot of the, you know, people within their early 20s, late 20s that also are getting the real estate license like right now. So what sort of piece of advice would you give someone who's actively working for their license?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I'm a pretty resourceful, intelligent person. And I even found the dynamic coming out of the program and working like a little bit of a disconnect. And I worked with a realtor where she showed me some of like the tools on the back end, and I developed like a playbook for myself so that I could go back and refer to some of those things like as I had future clients. But I did interview with a lot of teams, and from the solo standpoint, I think for people that are young and starting out, probably starting with a team makes the most sense because you have the support to learn and navigate through those things. They'll provide you with the leads. Like you'll probably get a lot more experience just starting out that way, as opposed to trying to figure it out on your own. I do think that starting out as a solo agent's not necessarily the easiest. So I think if you are like fresh out and you're really young and, you know, you haven't even owned a home, like, you know, that's probably going to be the best place for you to start.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. That's actually really good advice. Because I think a lot of people want to be that person that is independent. They're on their own. They've done this license. They can do it.
And you'll get there. Yeah. This will help you. Like, that's kind of your stepping stone. And maybe not. Like, not everyone wants to like build to that point.
Yeah,
right?
For sure. Now, for the book that you wrote, and obviously this was successful for you, do you have an interest of doing another book? And if so, what would that look like? Like, what are we looking at?
Yeah. I mean, I thought that, I always thought that would just be the one book. And then now that people have read it, like I had a meeting before here and the woman actually had read it too. And she's kind of like, because it came out a few years ago, she's kind of like wants to fill in the blanks from then to now.
Yeah.
Because a lot has happened and a lot that I can't even like really talk about at the moment. But I feel like if another one comes out in a couple of years, I could see that happening.
So it is possibly on your radar.
Right. Yeah, it would be like, that's very much like almost my life story in the book. But this would come with like a lot of other lessons and stuff like that. So I feel like in the back of my mind, it's possible.
Got it.
And obviously I even learned a lot just from the process of writing the book the first time. But yeah, we'll see. It wasn't necessarily intended to be like a series, but with all the stuff that has happened, it's been pretty crazy.
Awesome. Yeah. So going from the book, now going over to the podcast, we briefly were talking about your podcast itself. So growing that is something that it seems everybody and their mother is trying to do a podcast right now. Yeah. For yourself and the growth that you've had in the last, say, 12 months or so. Yeah. Like, how did you get started on that? And how are you keeping the capacity and bandwidth going? So you're still actively keeping it going. What does that look like for you?
Yeah. So I think, you know, one thing I learned even from my business was just doing things in groups or batching. So for example, when we used to interview talent, it takes a lot longer to interview people one-on-one. So we used to do group interviews where we would do like 10 to 15 people at a time for 8 hours. So I could interview 100 people in a day as opposed to like 10.
Right.
Right. So it's just a way to maximize your time. So I do the podcast the same way, where I'll do, 6 recordings a day for 2 days, and then they're done for 3 months. And then I have them banked. So I know like as they're coming, and then I pretty much do all the marketing a month at a time. So the only thing that slows me down there sometimes is having my sponsor lined up, because I'll need like their commercial and stuff like that to finish things.
Right.
But I would say to put together the creative, edit and render all the episodes, it's probably between 6 to 8 hours a month for like the 4 episodes. But then I have everything like written out. Obviously, even like ChatGPT helps to like add some of the creative that I'll have.
Of course.
I'll email it to myself, and then I'll just save it in my notepad for each day. So like all the content's ready to go. Using like things like Opus Clip to short form some of the podcasts, and those tend to do very, very well on YouTube and on Instagram.
Yep.
So that will take your long form podcast and snip it into smaller clips and stuff like that. And then I'll use just like CapCut to kind of like string that together and like make it a little fancier with B-roll and things like that. But I think for the most part, it's been good. And I've had some really like interesting conversations, met people I never would have across Canada and the United States. And I think it was just another way to be like, identify yourself as someone you can like, know, and trust. And now you're kind of like, people look at it like, oh, like they associate you with those people that you're interviewing. So if they've done big things, even maybe I haven't done that stuff, but you get kind of put in that same category, like, which from the multifamily conference, right? Yes. Like rubbing shoulders with all those same people can open up doors and opportunities. So I looked at it from that standpoint, that it'll just help with the branding. And it's something that I think you don't realize who's paying attention, but I feel like anytime I see anybody, they always mention it. Like, so people are obviously like noticing
it's showing up for sure.
Yeah,
it shows up on my stuff.
Yeah.
And
so I mean, it's
all
something
of
that's
your
kind of interesting.
ads that are going to like whenever you post on like your Instagram or even LinkedIn too. So I'm an avid watcher too, so I have to say. I think what you're doing is great. Now you're juggling so many things, obviously. Now, how do you kind of manage your days as also being like a wife and a mom? Like, what does that look like for you? And like, what do you struggle with? Yeah, I mean, I think the hard thing is just trying to fit a lot into like 5 hours a day. Like my daughter, when she's at school, it's from 9 to 3:30, and then subtract me a half an hour for lunch. Right.
So I try to just be very efficient with my time. So I think just trying to again batch things, like when I do my blogs, it's like I'll do 4 to 6 weeks, and I know that takes 2 hours, and it's like it's done for the next month and a half. Right. So I always try to like batch things together, because if you're trying to do like one thing here, one thing there, and then you get a call for an hour, it's like if you're very fragmented with your time, it can be a lot harder to get through things. Of course. So I think just trying to be very strategic and having the structure. Like if with social media, like this is my plan. So like it's a lot easier to tailor things around that, right?
Of course.
So I always try to like
work
a week out with that stuff, with the topics. And if I see an idea that resonates, I'll just save it. So I have a folder of ideas, so that way when I need something, I'm like, I can just know to look there. Right. So it's not like day to day, you're like, what am I doing?
Right. I have a clue. I feel like you could also even create your own kind of educational program, because you kind of transitioned again. Like a lot of the women that I speak to is transitioned from one thing to another, which is common for ladies in general, because we are always on a daily basis finding new ideas and new challenges and new changes. Yeah. Where for you, you're going from like being with this events company into like writing an entire book, and then also doing a podcast with a real estate license. So if you were to kind of encompass some sort of program, right, of what you are the most pro at, what would that look like for you? Well, it's funny you should say that, because there's an organization I connected with in the last little while called Spark Financial, and they have created something called the Wealth Club. Okay. So they've actually asked me to come on board as their business and entrepreneurship coach. So I just developed like a 12-month group coaching program. So they'll have like, I'll present for an hour once a month, and that's kind of like the group platform. So for someone that's like a newer entrepreneur, like just going through all those fundamental things that an entrepreneur needs to consider when they're starting a business. So it'll start with like, business planning, fundamentals, legal stuff, compliance, HR. Like each month we'll have a different topic. And then from that, if anyone does feel like they could benefit from one-on-one coaching, then I can take them on in that respect as well, and just kind of come up with those plans specifically for them. Interesting. So that's kicking off officially next month. Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, so that's like they have different specialists in different areas and stuff like that, but just getting to know the owners, even though we connected more on the real estate side, like because I do have that background in business, I thought that would be a good fit for me. So, of course. Yeah. So you're already on the ball with that. My question was perfectly answered.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So what are the goals you have for yourself, let's say for the next 3 to 5 years? What does it look like for Serena?
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, I thought right now I would be a partner on a big multifamily property. And, my plan was that with the money that I had from the sale of a couple of properties in my business and stuff, that I took a year to think, what am I going to do next?
Right.
And what I ultimately landed on is like, why am I going to struggle and suffer through this alone when there's people that really know what they're doing? They've got the systems. And I've developed a lot of partnerships and relationships through the mastermind I've been part of and people I thought I could trust. But then the money that I had planned to use is tied up in some things at the moment. And it's unclear what's going to really happen with that. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping like the recovery will come back maybe in the next year or two. Mm-hmm. A lot of it's kind of in flux at the moment. So we'll see where that goes. But as we all know with real estate, you don't really need your own money. So, exactly. If you're not using your own money, there's ways that you can find the opportunities and raise money. Yeah. So obviously I've gotten to know a lot more about those strategies, but ideally I still want to resolve those things.
Of course.
And that would have been my plan ideally. So something where you can go in, rehab a property, keep on repurposing that original capital every couple of years to continue to grow your portfolio and continue using it. But I've had a bit of a setback.
That's okay. So it happens in life.
Yeah. So hopefully, things will continue along. But in the meantime, I'm just, trying to figure out, that segue to work in a commercial and go from there.
Got it. And then also hopefully doing another book.
Yeah.
And then keeping the podcast growing.
The ideas are there. The ideas are there. So
I'm really excited for this, this program that you're being a part of for entrepreneurs. That's so exciting.
Yeah. I think sometimes people just need, there's a lot, when I even think back, I'm like, you don't know what you don't know. Right. Yep. And I was probably 8 to 9 years in before I hired a coach. And then that led into a coach, then a mentorship, and then other different things. Right. And there's just easier ways to get where you want to go. Right. And it's just a matter of trying to take advantage of those resources.
Right. So what's something that you would tell your younger self if you had the opportunity to talk to her?
Yeah, I think, there's still things when I think back, we struggled through, I think finding the right creative partner was a big challenge for us along the way. But I wasted a lot of time on honestly, bookkeeping and accounting. And a big thing was just well, how do we explain to someone these 200 people we have to pay this week? And we eventually with technology developed a system where, we dropped things into our Google Drive and it was in a spreadsheet. So it's an event's coming in 2 weeks, we have $2,000 owing, we would just earmark that. And then as the staffer book, my account manager would add them in and that would go to the bookkeeper and she would draft the POs to develop payroll. But I was spending anywhere from 2 hours to sometimes 2 days a week just issuing payments. Because I'm my employees couldn't necessarily do it, right? So I think I could have definitely hired a bookkeeper a lot sooner and maybe we could have grown a lot sooner. And even with the SEO stuff, had we done that sooner, things happen at the pace they need to happen with, and maybe we wouldn't have been prepared for that growth. But I think those two things probably would have been a huge benefit to us early on.
Of course.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, so with all the growth that you've happened and all this transition that has happened for you in life, what is one thing that you're most looking forward to within the next however many years?
Yeah, I think, again, priorities do shift. I went a long time thinking that I wouldn't necessarily have children. I lost my brother when I was really young, and there was really devastating for our family. And I just was well, I never want to go through what my mom went through, but having a little girl and seeing her grow, it's just, I like working, I like having purpose, but then I also have this little person, that wants to have dance parties and spend time with me and play all the time. Yeah. And, so it's kind of you're balancing both of those things. So I think there's something very fulfilling about both, but, I like working, just not at the pace I worked at in my 20s and 30s.
Got it.
Right. So I think just giving her those experiences, we've traveled with her quite a bit, and, it's something that she talks about for months and months afterwards. And, just being able to give her a childhood that I wasn't able to have is probably a big thing for me right now.
Right. Yeah. That's the ultimate goal for somebody.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you came today.
Thank you.
And everyone I know who is watching is obviously really grateful too. So if someone wants to connect with you, Serena, where are they going? Where can they find you?
Yeah. So for the podcast on Instagram, it's at Inspire to Invest Podcast. And for the Realtor stuff, Serena Holmes Realtor. So
got it.
Pretty straightforward. They're similar across all platforms.
Got it. Okay, so everyone can kind of contact you on those ones. And we're going to be putting a link to your banner across the bottom. And that's another way to contact you as well.
Very robust.
Yeah. There we go. Well, I appreciate you coming in today. Thank you so much, Serena. This has been a great conversation. And I love everything that you are doing. You're very inspiring.
Thank you.
And we will see everyone again. It actually will be in 2 weeks from today. Next week is being held off for now. And we will see you, like I said, 2 weeks from today. And we're going to have another guest on there, which I'm super excited about as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and thank you, Serena, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, guys.